You ready to get started, Mercedes?
I think so. Yes, we have a quorum and we can get started.
I think so. All right, we'll get started here. As Don put in the chat, good time of day. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. We're such a global organization that time is kind of amorphous for us. We all have different time zones, but we all have one different goal in common, and that's to help build great data services through Dataverse and build friendships along the way, because I count all of you as our friends. So I want to go through a few things. I guess I should, for those new members, I'm Jonathan Crabtree. I work here at the Odom Institute and help Mercedes work with the Global Dataverse Community Consortium. But I wanted to kind of give an outline of what we're going to talk about this morning, this afternoon, this evening, whatever the time is. But we'll do an update on our finances real quick. Financial stuff's important, but that's not the meat of this thing. What I really want to talk about is all the great work that all of our members have been doing, and it's a contribution of the members. That's what we are. We're a consortium of members, and everyone's chipping in to make Dataverse a better package. And as Gary said yesterday morning, we have made an impact. We made a huge impact, and we are continuing to make an impact. And I'm always amazed to see how things are moving forward. And then we'll go over like the governance structures and some slight changes there. And we'll talk about our services, and then we'll talk about have some community discussion and allow folks to chip in and help guide the direction we go. So the first thing I want to talk about is our new members. We have members quite literally from around the world, 32 members now from 15 countries. And I think last year we had 22. We had 10 new members this year, and several more countries. And they quite literally span the globe, which is amazing. We have a very broad reach and a very diverse group of folks, and it's growing all around the world. I love seeing all the different new countries. Just this week, we had a new member from Ecuador. So we're having more and more and more countries and people and just friendships around the world. And as someone mentioned in the chat, yes, Brazil is growing. I see several Brazils popping up here. So we have an amazing group of people that are pulling together to help build the Dataverse community and get it larger and larger and expand its reach. So quickly, let's talk a little bit about budget and budget numbers. I never cease to be amazed about the hard work and the way the Dataverse community perseveres through anything. 2020 was not a great year for most people. It was a very difficult change, difficult in financial terms, difficult in personal terms. The COVID situation has really been horrible for many people all around the world. But all through this, everyone has really persevered and worked hard. And quite frankly, these days we're busier than ever because there's lots of work to be done, and the work never stopped. So in 2021, just up to now, we've already had for the GDCC, we've already had over $103,000 in income. And that's based on some of our services, as well as some of our membership fees and whatnot. But we're doing more and more contract services and more ability to help people with Dataverse and consulting with that. And we'll talk about that later in our services. One thing we did have from last year, which is unfortunate, but it's just the way things were in 2020, we had over a $10,000 deficit that we rolled over into 2021. And this was due to a couple different reasons. We had some data site overages, extra DOIs and they changed the fee structure a little bit on us midstream, so that hurt us a little bit. But we also have some unpaid fees, and many folks that have not paid those fees from 2020. What I did, everyone who has not paid this year so far will fall into this accounts receivable line, the $43,000 that yet unpaid or contracts. If one of the organizations is in that, you would have got an email yesterday. I sent reminders to everyone, and please remit that as soon as possible. If you've already remitted it, and I said this in that email, it is possible that there was some confusion on where it got posted. The international wire transfers and the like sometimes can be confusing. We also really understand that universities, government, and a lot of organizations are just very slow to pay. It takes time to get through the system. So we're not super critical on this, but we do want to watch our budget. So far, our expenses are a little over 136,000. And with the accounts receivable, we're still in a pretty good balance. We are operating as a nonprofit, so we're not looking to make money. We're just wanting to help service the customers and service our people. So it would be nice to have a little more cash balance because we do have bills to pay. And currently, in a temporary situation, we're running all the business and finances are being run through the University of North Carolina here. They've been very gracious to allow us to create an account in order to run these things. It is a temporary solution eventually, and we'll talk about this later. We hope to move that out because it's really not a UNC thing or a Harvard thing. It's a community thing. So what we're looking to build is a community, and part of that will go to the finances as we move forward. So we're not in awful shape as far as the finances go. Things are doing very well, and we don't anticipate huge changes, but we do need some minor modifications to help prevent these overages. And one part of it is that we incur wire transfer fees, credit card fees, and bank fees. And we did not include those in the past. We actually put some things on the invoices that if you're going to pay in a certain way to add a little bit, that doesn't work very well with many organizations. So we just need to roll that into the fee. And so the proposed membership fee for 2022 will go up by $50, and that will include all the fees. So there will be nothing to add and nothing to change on your invoice. You'll have one invoice and that's what you pay. You don't have to figure out what you have to pay based on how you pay. And that'll be due January 1st every year. And that'll help us not have those deficits rolling forward. We don't want to be in the negative moving forward. As far as the DOI fees, the data site fees, that will not change substantially. These numbers are a little different than the 2021 fees, but the increase is the inclusion of those bank fees. There's a percentage that's charged by our bank every time we make a transaction, the international transactions included, as well as credit cards and things like that. So we've added those fees, we rolled those fees in, and there's a slight change in the euro to US dollar conversion. Since we have to pay data site for these DOIs, we have to pay in euros. So that changed slightly. So these are the proposed fees. It's not a huge change here because you had to include the percentages for wire transfers and things like that as well. We were very fortunate this year that DataSite did not change their, I attended the DataSite meeting, and they did not change the fee schedule for next year. So we're good to go. And we have had a conversation with them, so they won't change that fee schedule without giving us some notice. So which is really nice. It won't happen like it did the first time. So that'll help prevent any overages or underages there. So we can help control that as well. So those are the only financial changes, and basically that's its inclusion of the bank fees there as well. One thing that I do want to talk about is some new structure and some actually it's basically, we've talked about this before, but we want to have 3 different committees, and we're starting to flesh those committees out. And I'm sure that by now everyone has heard, and now on the screen here we see that Mercedes has kind of moved down from the steering committee into the advisory committee. And every time I see it move, my heart kind of jumps a little bit because we're dearly going to miss Mercedes. Now, we're happy to share her with other folks in the world because she's absolutely amazing. So we're happy for her to do that, but we're not going to lose her either as an advisory member or a friend. So we don't have a problem there. But we do have some new members of the steering committee, so we can start doing the day in and day out business, handling the finances, handling contracts, things like that, and making decisions. I'm going to stay on to help out, but Steve from the Australian Data Archive, Liz Hess at IQSS at Harvard. She's been at Harvard as the executive director there. She'll now step in and help out the transition with as Mercedes leaves, as well as Philip from UIT. So the four of us are going to help kind of guide things and get things moving and continue what the great work that's happening, but also take us to this next level and start looking how we're going to into the future, how we're going to operate. And then, of course, we'd love to have an advisory committee, and Mercedes is going to still try to help us out the best as possible there and connect with external groups. And it's actually very, very perfect because these external groups can be things like CODATA or RDA or government agencies or other repositories, people that have done things like this or are interested in open data. And as Gary mentioned, we have made a huge difference, and many governments are starting to get into open data, and many organizations are really pushing that. So this advisory committee will be very important to keep us on the right path, because we always know that things are changing and dynamic at all times. And we never can forget our technical group as well. And we're looking to build these new groups and come up with new communication strategies within these groups. But Jim and Gustavo are going to help lead our technical advisory committee. And we'll be adding more people, potentially external people that from external groups that have done this before, and look into how we can be more agile and how we can actually help incorporate all the different work the community is doing. And as I said before, the critical part here is not the governance of the money, it's the community, and it's the people, and it's the hard work that everyone in the Dataverse community has done to enhance Dataverse itself, but also to enhance open data, fair data sharing, all of the work that has really impacted the whole world, especially the research world, and made it a better research world. So as far as the governance next step, really high on the list is to figure out a way to investigate a nonprofit status. We need this for several reasons. Many cases, as Danny mentioned yesterday in our meeting, like Slack gives us a huge discount if we were to have a 501c3, as well as many countries have a hard time paying bills that are not to a physical entity. And we've had some challenges with some organizations that couldn't pay UNC on behalf of GDCC. They needed a GDCC to be a legal entity in and of itself. So this will be really important. And as I said earlier, it's a temporary thing here at UNC to manage this. We really want the community to manage this. And we want to have our advisory committees help manage the budget, manage the whole process, and work with the community, because this is a community effort, and that's what we're looking to do. And I put 501c3 here because that's the U.S. standard for nonprofits, but we are an international organization. If it's better to go with another type of legal entity in another country, we don't know. We're going to investigate those things, and I'd love to talk with members and have everyone join together and help solve this problem. But we need to come up with some sort of nonprofit status in order for us to take it to the next level. And I look forward to working with everyone over the next year to figure that out. So this is the meat. This is what everyone is really, really pushing forward. And you know, the folks at IQSS for many, many years have really worked hard on Dataverse. It even started before Dataverse. Those of us that have been around a long, long time remember the predecessor of the Dataverse, but we've been working on this a long, long time and had a huge, huge effort to do this. But as the community grows, we want to augment those efforts at Harvard, and we want to consolidate all the work we're doing. And that's where we have this really, really broad range of work that the GDCC does. And that is the coordinating of all those community development work and some of the fabulous work that Jim's been doing and talking about the different working groups, and we'll talk about those in detail a little later, but also providing design guidance, helping people move toward a unified vision for Dataverse. And we all have different needs. Every community has different needs and different strategies to meet those needs. And if we work together, then Dataverse itself will be even bigger. And if we think very altruistically here, then we can work together to make it a better product. And it not only helps us, but helps everyone else. And it's been such a pleasure to work with this group. That's easy because everyone thinks like that in the Dataverse world. And it comes from this grassroots effort that we all really are here as a family to work together and friends to make these things better. We also have worked with outreach and support to support different new features and help people learn about the new features that are out there. So let's talk about a couple of them, a couple of the projects in detail that kind of highlight some of the stuff that GDCC is doing. But I do want to also mention that GDCC is a community collaboration, as I've said many times. We want to do what you need. So if there's something that the community needs, be sure to let us know. And as we go through some of this, and I think I forgot to mention it early, in the notes document for this meeting, there's a Google Doc where you're welcome to add in any comments or features that you things about GDCC that you like, things that you would like to see changed. Also, any comments on proposed changes as far as the fee schedules or governance or anything like that. That's a great place to put those notes so we can kind of get some feedback for that. And Danny put that doc in the chat, and I apologize for not mentioning that earlier. But let's talk about some of the projects that kind of highlight some of the things that we've been doing over the last year. One of which is installation and training support for different projects. We saw a challenge in that, and often is the case, people see Dataverse and they see it as a great solution. They really love the idea and they need it. There's a great need all around the world for data management, for open data, for fair data. And researchers are more and more being required to manage their data, but there are no services offered in those areas. But we all know that Dataverse does take someone to install, to manage, to run the patches. It also takes archivists and curators. And in some situations, organizations may not have that full realm of support that many groups have. But as a global Dataverse community consortium, together, we have all of those resources and we can share them with others. So we've started contract work with different groups, and these two are listed here, the Institute for Adult Learning Dataverse in Singapore and the Living Goods Dataverse in Kenya. Both of those groups had a need, and we were able to come up with a contract for that need and help provide not only installation of Dataverse, but managing of the hardware, managing of the software, patching, designing things like connections to single sign-ons at their institutions, and all of the technical stuff that goes. But in addition, the curation workflows in both of these instances, they had really good experts on their data, but they hadn't curated that data for public access. And they needed training on that. And their researchers needed training on how to use Dataverse. So GDCC sponsored an effort to create training videos and efforts to learn what these groups needed, and in turn create some training videos and have some sessions where we walk them through the different options and how to set up Dataverse and how to set up different profiles within Dataverse and different workflows, and basically create a custom curation workflow for each of these groups and then train them on how to use it. It's an ongoing project, actually, so it's not just that one up front. Every year, GDCC will be working with these folks to continue service and to be sure these systems are up and running and patched, and also any data issues they have. So this is a fabulous new program that many other groups that may have these kinds of needs. And I said before, this is very customized to the individual group. So if your group wants to help or needs help, we're very, very happy to have you there as well. One other thing that we do is some custom programming consultations. I talked about that design consultations on how we help you design features for Dataverse, whether they be internal to Dataverse or external tools or connecting to external groups. We can look at it as a holistic and have that connection within the Dataverse community out to your organizations. And here's just two examples, the French National Center for Research and the work that's happening at DONS. And I won't go into detail on exactly what some of these efforts are, because you're going to see them. All this stuff pops up in all of the sessions, and I think the session following this one potentially has I think it's Don's work in that session, but there'll be several of these will be advertised in many of the sessions, and basically it's the bringing together of all of the great work that's happening all around the world, and in order to integrate Dataverse within existing national infrastructures, or to actually use Dataverse for that infrastructure. I will mention, for example, the Science PO and the French National Center for Research work is real important for the CESDA community, because basically they're trying to harvest information. CESDA is harvesting information from these many Dataverses, and we're making sure that the correct metadata gets into the CESDA catalog, and that your Dataverse is well represented in the right language. And in many cases, it's that there's some language issues they were helping work on, and there's many other components there. One thing I will mention is that we're always looking for new projects where we can collaborate and do some of these custom programming and consultation, and kind of help coordinate. The idea here is we don't have lots and lots of different forks of the software, and we're very happy to say that we don't have lots of that in this community. We do have a few, because we have to get the work done sometimes, but in case we want to fold those in. So as earlier in the Don's presentation, and as Danny mentioned, it's really nice to see a presentation of a new service and a new way to operate with Dataverse, along with a pull request. That means they're working out there too, and combining all of this stuff. The last but not least, I'd like to talk about some of the existing things we've been doing for the last year or so. GDC sponsors the Git repository that has all of the language packs, and many languages are already listed there. If yours is not listed there, we're very happy to coordinate with you and your group to help support a new language there, as well as all of the packages and add-ons and tools that we can put into that Git repository, as well as the Jenkins build facilities that are used with the GDCC as well as at Harvard. And last but not least are these working groups. Working groups have been a fabulous success. Many of the presentations that you'll see during the community meeting are outputs of these working groups, and how these working groups have brought together the community to design a new feature or make a decision based upon how that should be operated. One very interesting fact, for example, there'll be some talk about licensing in some of the community meetings. You know, when we think about ourselves, how do you want licensing or potential embargo? Another thing that was mentioned is embargoes. And many of the efforts that we worked on are to coordinate some of these activities. But if we think about just our own organization, what ODM needed for embargoes and what ODM needed for licensing, I would have never thought about what is needed at DONS or what might be needed at the Australian Data Archive. So if we work together and collaborate, we can make it support many different groups, and often it doesn't take any extra effort. It actually maybe even less effort, because we can leverage what someone else has already done. So that's the idea behind these working groups, is to collaborate on the design, the decision-making, how we do these, and then to coordinate these things and get them into the workflow that Danny mentioned about the pull request, and get them in testing and get them into the base system. And that's been very fabulous to see all of these pull requests coming through from all these working groups. And I have one more thing I'd like to mention, and this is a plea for help, actually. So all of the work within the GDCC is performed by members. The idea here is members sharing resources. GDCC does have some effort and does have some folks helping out here, most notably Jim, who's doing a fabulous job with helping coordinate the working groups and lots of really nice programming. But the idea here is if we can work together to help the community, then we can help each other. So in the case of the work in Kenya and Singapore, some of the staff here at Odom have been pitching in to help that group there. But it's not limited to that. If you have a programmer, for example, on your staff that has some extra cycles, we can actually use those programmers within the GDCC effort, and we can reimburse your organization for that effort within that. And it's not limited just to programmers either, because as we know, there's far more to managing a data repository than just the technical side. So archivists, curators, multimedia folks, UI, as many times we need UI testing, those kinds of things. So there's lots and lots of different components of this. And if we pitch in as a community, we have all these resources. And if we can get together and consolidate those resources and then share them with others, not only will we be helping our fellow members, but also we'll be promoting open data, fair data, and even pushing forward this goal of fair and open data for the research communities all around the world. And will we really complete that vision that Gary talked about and how we have made an impact and continue to make impact. And the reason we do that is not because any of one group or one person. It is really, truly a community effort, a community of colleagues and friends. And that's what GDCC is about. And we'd love to have, if you're not a member, we'd love to have you as a member. If you would like to participate in these groups, please put a note in the documents. And if you have any comments on where we should go or what new things we should do, we're happy to talk about those. You can put them in the docs, but we're also we have some time left for some discussion where we can talk about what the next steps are. And maybe we can have a few of the steering committee members speak a little bit. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Merce and let her kind of direct us.
Thank you, John. Thank you. You said it, you couldn't have said it any better. I love the way your view of the community of GDCC, of the way of collaborating all together and putting all our parts to make the total bigger than its parts, right? And it just, well, it's hard to follow what you said because it's very nicely expressed. And also I want to thank you for all your nice words, because actually I think GDCC is fortunate in general, the Dataverse community, to have somebody like John for his energy and friendliness, and it's a big part of what makes that work so well in the way and in a way that it's so that people feel invited and welcome to be part of it. So thank John for all your work here and and your vision for the future. But I also want to give a chance for Liz Hess to say a few words. I think, well, remember you already know Liz as the Executive Director of IQSS, and a great, fantastic colleague, partner, friend, and everything that you can imagine, and boss. So, and
Thanks.
It's great that you're helping also with the GDCC steering committee. So yeah, a few words from you, please.
Thanks, Merce. I'm Liz Hess, and as John mentioned, I am the Executive Director for IQSS. I've been with IQSS for 4 years, and I'm a long-serving Harvard employee, always working with faculty and staff and students in using technology in teaching and learning and in research. So I'm really excited to have this opportunity to join the steering committee. I have big shoes to fill in terms of Merce. We are going to miss her tremendously, but I'm very excited that she's staying on an advisory capacity. And we were joking last night that Merce has invited us all next year to have the Dataverse community meeting in Barcelona. And she'll be putting us up at her new home. So we look forward to having Mercedes continuing to be involved, and I look forward to getting to know some of you and working with John and the rest of the steering committee.
Great, thank you. And we now, I mean, we want to really give a chance for all of you to share ideas, to ask questions. We saw in the chat that some of you joined very recently GDCC. What would be your expectations? What would you like to see coming from the consortium? Yes, anything. I see that Steve is here. Steve, could you say a few words? Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks. All right. Yes, sort of coming in late, as it were. Yeah, no, let's say I'm sort of happy to join the committee as well. I think it's the sort of capacity to sort of expand the group, and part of it was looking at sort of our coverage internationally of the executive is going to be sort of a helpful step there. Again, looking forward to working with everyone. Obviously, many of you I've had working relationships with over periods of time already. So it's been nice to sort of extend that further. I'm more than willing to take up the trip to Barcelona. That's if Australians can ever leave Australia again. There's no evidence that will be the case anytime soon. But once that happens, I'm more than happy to make a trip there and do the visit there. Similarly, I say if we can get you all down here as well at some point as well.
Well, I think that if there is a Dataverse community meeting in Australia, the beginning of the meeting with John, we were saying about the idea of the hybrid to do a combination that we have some online participation plus some in-person meetings. Yeah. So we'll figure out something. And I want to mention that Philip Conzet is also in the steering committee, like John said, but he's in the core trust seal session, which is happening at the same time. So that's why he's not here. But I think most of you, or if not all of you, know him. He's very, very active in the community too.
So Steve, I will mention that, Australia did start off as a prison, that, right? So, you may be stuck there now.
Oh, that was the whole point. Exactly. Well, actually, the reason Australia exists is because the Americans decided didn't want to be part of the empire either. So that's the whole reason Australia got settled in the first place. So I blame you lot.
Okay. Yeah. We'll take it. We'll take it.
So just to elevate a few questions from the notes doc, Valentina asked, what is the recommended way to suggest new features? So I have an answer for this as far as the project as a whole, but Valentina, if you're asking about how to access GDCC services to build new features, I'll ask John and others to answer.
So we have a GDCC listserv where folks talk and bounce ideas off, but also these working groups. If you have a new feature or an idea, you can start by contacting me. I'll help you direct you to the right place, but we can start creating a working group around that. So for example, a good example is yesterday or last night during the GDCC meeting, we had someone from Brazil interested in interoperability, and we don't have a working group on interoperability, and they were interested in interoperability with CCAN or interoperability with DSpace, because in many institutions in Brazil had that need to coordinate with their existing organization. Well, we know we have OAI PMH, but there's been some interest moving forward to creating a working group around that. So that's the beginnings of a working group. So if you, for example, have an idea and you'd like to lead a working group, that's how it starts. We can get started with a handful of ideas. We'll have these working group sessions and we'll talk about it as a community forum. And then we'll decide on the best path and who needs to be in these working groups. Often the case is, for example, if you were to come with an idea collectively as a group, we know other people around the world working on those areas, and we'll matchmake, we'll put those people together. The language packs kind of come about in that way. We had several people curious about that, and the folks in Scholars Portal in Canada, we're doing some great work there. And we kind of expanded on that, and the next thing you know, it gets bigger and bigger and more people join. So I think it's kind of a matchmaking thing, how we put community members together. And right now it's fairly informal. That may be a better way that we could do this. We could come up with some sort of mechanism to suggest some of these features or working groups rather than the more informal way. And we'd love suggestions on that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Great. The next question is from Peter Crowley about how to start a new working group. And John, I think you kind of touched on this in your last answer, but any additional information to add about how to start a working group?
Maybe I can add a quick thing there, that one of the things we started talking about with the working groups is sort of separating the idea of more of an interest group versus a working group, which is something that RDA and other groups have made the same distinction. And so interest groups, you know, when you have a common topic you want to talk about and maybe just coordinate to get a better, you know, better description, better community sense of what you're talking about, those are easy to start up. You can just, you know, we have the Slack, you can start an interest group channel. So geospatial and other things have done that. And then as you get towards actually, you know, deciding you want to get something done, more of a working group, I think that's when, you know, we start to, you've got a goal. We want to know what the goal is. We want to make sure it's consistent with overall Dataverse design, and get, you know, IQSS and GDCC and other community members all sort of making sure that this is a, you know, good feature that's going to be useful for everyone, and sort of a little more structure around that. And those, when we started up the 1 hour meetings on Thursdays for the working groups, that was more what those groups have been about at this point. You know, we've really been trying to hash through, you know, you'll see if you come to the next session with controlled vocabularies, you know, here's a demo of how we could do it. What's the general case we want? How can we minimize the impact on Dataverse as a whole? And if you don't want to use controlled vocabularies, you know, how do we keep the cost down? And so through those working group sessions, we basically figured that out, and we are now at the point where if you go to that session, you'll see demos and presentation of how we think this will all go, and something that can be integrated into Dataverse pretty easily. So I think, you know, that sort of two-step thing, again, you know, interest groups I think are very lightweight and informal, as John says, just because, you know, right, we're a community, we should be able to jump in and you know, figure things out together whenever we want to, and that there's support for that. And then we can get more formal as you really get to an idea of what you know, what needs to be a next step for Dataverse.
And I'd like to add also that the importance of having, I mean, that has been mentioned, but just to emphasize the importance also to having a chair or maybe two chairs of a group that really leads and moves it forward. So there are a lot of good intentions for all of us to let's talk about this and so, but it does require an effort to bring people together and just have the discussions, and even more if it's a working group, to be able to have some deliverables that are well identified in the beginning, and that they keep moving. So think of that. It doesn't need to be a lot of time, but and it can be in a very efficient way if there is a group that works well together, but it's nice to have this leadership within a group.
Great. So those are all the questions from the document and the chat. So I guess we'll open it up to general discussion and questions with just feel free to unmute and ask.
It could be anything. If you have just comments or ideas, or just, I mean, there are some things that came up in the session that we did, you know, 2 sessions for GDCC, right? So some of the members in other time zones were able to participate yesterday. So there was, well, for some groups talking about that they could offer, like John was saying, in terms of the help of the participation, participation that would be compensated, but to help as a service for more training, for example, providing training to new installations that so sometimes it's not by programming, but things like that. So if there are other groups here that say we could provide that, we have some bandwidth for this, and that would be something that could be coordinated through GDCC. So we help each other. So that's one thing that came up. There were a few other things, John, from yesterday. Maybe we could. There's some of the other things that we could discuss here, or any other ideas. Maybe we look at the notes and.
Sure. Just some of the themes that came up last night. One was just a quick discussion about the GDCC web presence along with Dataverse.
That's right. That's the one I was thinking. Right. So, yeah.
And specifically about providing some links and information about the working groups, about how to join, about the status of them, about the outputs of them.
Yeah, and I guess we mentioned this last night as well. There has been some discussion on how we can communicate better on our website, how we can coordinate the GDCC website with the Dataverse website, how all this stuff can be coordinated, and you know, how we can get information to the community better than we are now, and make it easier to find. And it's not all in multiple places. So some of that organization we'll work. We'd love to work on that over this next year on how we can do that to communicate a little bit better. We do lots of different things and lots of different services, and many of them are very custom, but we'd love to have that information on the website and easy to find examples, for example, of what we've done, what we could do to a new customer or a new person to do that as well. And I think it would be really nice to include in that a way to sign up if you have some extra bandwidth, as Mercedes mentioned, and it doesn't matter whether it's a programmer or an archivist or a UI person. If folks have a percent of a person or are thinking to hire someone, maybe I have some funds, but I don't have enough funds to hire a whole person. Maybe I want to hire a partial person, and maybe we can do that in the auspices of the GDCC as a community together. So if we'd be neat to have a way on our website where you can offer help, request help, and see what we're doing better. So I think that would be a good move for us over this next year.
Just one thing in terms of also for agile communication that is for folks here is in general a Slack channel for GDCC members only, like well, so the members can discuss some more specific GDCC membership issues would be a good way. I know there is that may be a quicker way to talk to each other than the mailing list or other methods. So, I mean, the website is very important for clear communication, transparency, but just, yeah, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I think it'd be a good idea myself.
Is this like in general a good tool for the folks here?
I mean, I would say generally, Mercedes, that's been a pretty effective tool for furthering some of those conversations. It's a little bit of a challenge, say, given that the conversations aren't public, and in some ways that would be a preferable model to go with, but there isn't really options around that allow you to do that. So as a but as a second best option there, I think it's enabled fairly detailed conversations to occur to allow some of these thoughts to come together effectively. Probably that it's just promoting that channel exists through the website is probably the relevant key there, and how do people connect in.
Yeah, so I definitely agree that Slack has been successful. I've been more hesitant to open it up with like a public and anyone can join link because of the message limit. So once we get the nonprofit status and we can get the free account, I think it'll be much easier to open it up. And then we have a whole new problem of managing the managing all the channels that'll inevitably spring up from that. But Mercedes, to clarify, did you mean a different Slack for GDCC members only beyond the general Dataverse community Slack, or some?
No, just one
channel?
Specific channel that could be
Got it.
for the members within that the Dataverse community. That's what I thought. It might be that there are some things that John I know wanted to share with the members. To say, I don't know, that it might be budget something related or some question or some update, and that would. It doesn't mean that some of the information could not go to other people, but there are some things. I mean, there is a difference in being a member, right? There's some GDCC has some responsibility towards the members, so that would be good to just have a members only.
Yeah, that'd be
Call
great.
it this way, GDCC.
It'd be another place for John to follow up about billing to people.
So we don't have a lot more time, but again, if there are any other questions, I think might be useful. I don't know, John, if, and the others in the steering committee probably haven't had a chance yet to, because this new governance is completely new. It's actually just been announced in this meeting for first time, right? But it might be good to have a time frame for having the advisory and the technical advisory committee set to get started, and to say by 2022 we should have the first meeting, for example, or I don't know what I said. I'm not putting you on the spot to commit to any time frame now, but that's one of the things that could be useful to share with the members as there is something, so that we understand. Also, I mean, and even the how do we alternate those committees, right? How do they change, so that we do have good representation, that maybe that doesn't get stuck always to be the same people. It might be that it changes over time, and we have representations from all the continents, from the from all the various countries that are part of the GDCC.
Yep, I agree. It's good to have milestones. They'll slip if we don't.
Mercedes?
Yes. Is that
may
done?
I ask one kind of quick question, or maybe it's just a general idea,
Sure.
but
Sure.
right now the consortium is kind of running a few services for Dataverse, including the guide server and like jenkins.dataverse.org. And right now that's in Odom space. One thing that might be something for the technical guidance committee to consider is the creation of a GDCC AWS account, like a central place, because that would really enable more testing and more resources in a centralized fashion, because we're happy to do it for Jenkins, but Oliver and Slava have that great big testing workflow set up, and they want test containers for that. And there's feedback. Anyway, it's just an idea.
Yeah. I mean, it seems that it's in the direction that it should go, right? I think it's just the timing of that. When will that be possible? But I cannot see that there is any other way at some point, right?
Just an idea.
Yeah, I think it's totally the right direction. Of course, we have to set up our infrastructure, and that's some of those things that the steering committee can get together sooner rather than later and start thinking about how we're going to take it to the next level where we have the resources to do some of these things. It may be in the future that not only do we provide installation services for other people in their Amazon space, but maybe we run it in our Amazon space, right? The GDCC has an Amazon space, and we will stand one up in that. And for example, I know we've had some discussions with the folks in the Middle East, the Arab Council for Social Sciences. They would like to have theirs run in Qatar rather than here in the US. So those types of things maybe in the long future. This is kind of long planning that we could have our own infrastructure that could be regional specific, where if a country needed something in a certain region, we could do that. So I think that's very forward thinking. I think that we could do some of this. And I agree with Mercedes, it's a question of timing, and probably the 501c3 might have to be in place first, but we can definitely work towards a more sustainable and well-rounded services.
I think part of that comes around setting up both the organization and the financial model. Is relevant to that. What you don't want to be doing is setting up a structure which incurs costs that can't be borne fundamentally. So you kind of want to running those discussions in parallel. Is what's our preferred model and preferred technical model. And I think that was the point that the technical advisory group is, well, technically speaking, how would we like to approach some of these things? And then from the point of view of the steering committee and the advisory group is, all right, well, how do you set up things up that it's going to enable that to occur in an effective way? It's the interaction of those, so you got to have the business and the technical models kind of aligned.
Yeah, it does seem fundamental. I wonder also what our levels of something like from Amazon, from AWS credits, or maybe it's Azure with Microsoft, so that there might be some ways of part of that being sponsored in a way that with some commitment for at least a couple of years or so, that would help an organization like that.
Yeah, and Mercedes and I have talked also about seeking some sort of grant to help us make that next transition. Sometimes foundations, especially that we've worked with, that might be willing to fund a grant to help consolidate all of this and go out and have time to go out and talk to people like Microsoft and Google and Amazon about supporting things like this. I think that may be another step too.
So there is one more question in the chat about translations. So we do have weblate.dataverse.org that I'll add into the chat. So Dimitri, just take a look at that and see if that's what you had in mind. And Slava, I think I saw you on the call. Slava, this is one where I minted a certificate for you for it. So is this that common service that's being mentioned? Okay. Well, Dimitri, take a look at it if that's what you had in mind, and if it's not, we can definitely discuss further. So there are no other questions in the chat for the note stock. So John and Mercedes, I'll turn it back over to you.
Well, I would like to thank everybody because it's a community effort, right? And that's the whole idea here is that all of this is a community effort. And I'd like to thank everybody for all their support through the last year. And Mercedes?
Yeah, the same. I just noticed that we made it, we timed it well. We're just at the end of the hour. So yeah, thanks. And let's continue the conversation. This was just providing information for you. Well, yeah, maybe through the Slack, as we were saying, let's continue that conversation and have any ideas. And thanks again to the group here. Okay, so we'll
Thanks,
see
everybody.
you in other sessions. Great sessions all day and tomorrow. Good luck with everything.
Yes.
Great.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
everyone.
Thanks.
And I
Bye.
did, the core trust seal meeting is going for another 30 minutes. So I did add the link in the chat, or you can find it in the email sent out.
Oh, perfect. Thank you.
Good,
All right.
thanks. Bye.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.